Hi, I have a special dinosaur protection jacket today. It's got that poisonous radioactive frog pattern and color, so if a T-Rex saw me, he would not eat me. Okay, enough dead jokes. What is the best bicycle shop in United States or Canada or United Kingdom, Germany, Australia? You see where I'm going with this. Of course, I cannot check on the quality of work of every bicycle shop, on any bicycle shop in the world, and I don't intend to. It's not possible to do, and it would make no sense to do that or to recommend a particular bicycle shop, because different people have different priorities and tastes, and one shop cannot please everyone. So there are options and choices and differences, and that's generally good. What I will try to do in this video is to give you some general tips and advice on how to make it easier for yourself to find a good bicycle shop, to get a good bicycle service, and I will also use some reverse psychology and explain how to make sure that you get disappointed and get a poor quality service, so that if you do the opposite, you are more likely to get a better experience. So with that in mind, the first thing I will note is that what I do, I fix everything for myself, by myself. I understand that many people are not inclined or haven't got the time to do that, but I think it's fair mentioning it because that is what I do. But that aside, if you need to have someone else service your bicycle, for the northern hemisphere, the best bicycle shops are called November, December, January and February. Those are the off-season months when there is no hectic rush in bicycle shops, so that mechanics have the time to dedicate themselves and do a proper job on your bicycle. And for people living, watching this from the land down under and from the southern hemisphere, it's of course the opposite of those months, but you get the idea. Those living in moderate climates where it's always nice and great to ride bicycles, try to figure out and ask when the least hectic months are, so that you can plan to do your bicycle service in those months. This is a win-win because it allows you to get a good quality service, and it allows bicycle shops to have some more income during the off-season and to provide better training for the new mechanics, because it's easier to do that when there's no hectic rush and senior mechanics can check up on work and tutor the young mechanics. So it's the best idea to plan your bicycle service in those months. Of course, if you have some accident, something breaks down unexpectedly, or flat tire that you don't want to fix, you go when that happens. But if you are able to do any planning, it's best to plan and discipline yourself to go when you don't plan to ride the bicycle, or when most people don't ride bicycles, when it's cold and snowy or rainy. So that's one advice. The opposite of that is, of course, in April, May, June and July for the northern hemisphere, and the opposite for the southern. Then it's hectic, phone is always ringing, people are always coming into a shop asking something, buying something, and it's very difficult to do a high quality work. It's very difficult to not make any mistakes. Even some shops who can afford to have separate personnel for customers, for dealing with customers and doing sales, and separate personnel for fixing bikes, it's very difficult when you have many bicycles waiting in line to get finished and serviced, to not rush and to not make any mistakes. People often stay overtime, and it can be hectic, and it's very difficult to do a high quality service in those rush months. What you can do in addition to choosing the season and planning ahead to help others help you, to help others give you a good service, is to bring in a bicycle that is washed and clean. Yes, in a perfect world it shouldn't make any difference, but in reality many bicycle shops are not in a position or don't have the time to thoroughly clean and wash bicycles, and it's a lot easier to work. You can work a lot faster and easier and notice any problems or cracks if a bicycle is clean. Of course, don't use any pressure washers. If you're not careful, you can put water into the bearings, and if the bearings are not replaced, it's better to stay away from those and just use some soap, warm water, and avoid using any grease or greasy sponges on disc brakes, on discs, rotors, whatever it's called. So, but apart from that, it's a good idea to have your bicycle be clean. I will also mention, prices. From a mechanic's perspective, it's best if I can be allowed to recommend what should be done on a bicycle, because some things are often connected. For example, worn out cassette, chain and front chainrings need to be replaced altogether if they're all worn, otherwise you will not get a well-functioning bicycle. So if you go to a professional and they are willing to give you advice and assess, listen to them, have the patience and see what they recommend, and if you cannot afford what they recommend, it can be a bad idea if you insist on just having some things done and not everything, or fitting within a certain budget, because you might not get a well-working bicycle. It's better to wait, save up some more money and then get a proper job. Mechanics are often, at least in my experience, more than willing to share that information and to give advice, because they also don't want people being unhappy with their work. So that's one thing, and for me it's a lot easier when people say, okay, try to make it as cheap as possible, but to work within a certain recommendation or to not work at all. The worst possible scenario is to have a very tight budget, or to have to call the customer for everything that you see that needs to be done on a bicycle as you go. Sometimes it's not possible to determine things right away ahead of time, and it's smoother if I have some extra budget for anything unexpected in that case. But the worst thing is to just have a bicycle given to me and then have to be on the phone for every little thing. It makes it difficult to do a good job and you waste a lot of time. So if that information is of any use, that's what I'm sharing now. I will also mention, I know some mechanics who are very good mechanics and very good human beings, but they are not very good with working with people. They, without intending to do so, can come off as rude and impolite. And if you are coming to a shop and paying, of course you expect to be treated politely and with respect, but sometimes if you can look over such imperfections like a rough user interface like Linux, you might get a good service. Just like very polite people do not always offer a good service or always do a good job. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing that is worth mentioning is mistakes and reviews and advice from other customers and friends. People remember bad things more clearly than they remember the good things. It's considered normal. It's considered what you expect. So I don't think there is a bicycle shop in the world who's never made a mistake or been rude to a customer. Regardless of whether it's justified or not, it's bound to happen when you work with people. And in my opinion, only people who never work, who never do any work, never make mistakes. So one way to tell a good shop from a bad one is not whether they ever make mistakes. It's whether mistakes are something that's a very rare exception, or it is something that happens regularly, on a regular basis. But also how they deal with those mistakes. People who do a good job, if you come to them with a problem, mistake they've made or something, and are patient, polite, point it out, they will probably feel ashamed and try their best to fix it as quickly as possible and to even compensate you in some way for their own mistakes. The opposite of that, and that is the way to tell if a shop is a bad one, is if they don't do any of those things and just avoid it, or it's all your fault, or don't do good on that. So that's one way to tell. So mistakes will always happen, but it matters how shops handle those mistakes. That's the bottom line, in my opinion. Now, when choosing a bicycle shop or something like that, I think it's a good idea to start locally. It's more convenient if a shop is closer to you, and it's also a good idea to support your local community. And so it's worth giving a shot to those bicycle shops that are nearby and see if they offer a good service. You don't have to be an expert mechanic to see if your bicycle is working okay or not after the service, so that's easy. Especially if you take advice from the mechanics and have them do what they recommend should be done. If you insist on certain repairs and not others, and they cannot get it all working properly, then it cannot really be always blamed on them, and you cannot consider it a poor service. But if you let them do what they recommend and your bicycle is not in a good working condition, then you know it's probably not been done properly. And if you see with them and about it and they don't give you a proper or a good way of handling that and repairing that again, then it makes sense to move on and look for another shop. There are some poor quality shops and bad mechanics, so of course, so if that's the case, then definitely move on. Just like one same mechanic or same shop is good for one person and bad for other person, because people are different. Some people that's one thing more related to mechanics and shop owners, but I'll mention it. Bicycle servicing and bicycle shops, just like any jobs with people, with customers, are about making people happy. They're not about fixing bicycles perfectly or selling the cheapest bicycle parts or bicycles. That's a common mistake that many mechanics and shop owners make, not understanding that it's about making people happy. Different people have different choices, different criteria. Some, for example, like to have a good deal, to have something cheap, even if it's of poor quality. Even if the work is not done perfectly well, they are happy only if they paid a small amount of money because they feel they got a good deal. That's how they are. That's perfectly okay. And if you are able to have that flexibility and figure out what kind of person you are dealing with and see what it takes to make that person happy, and that is a thing that's acceptable to you, that makes things a lot easier, and it makes it a lot better. The opposite extreme are people who want top quality service and are happy to pay a lot of money. Those people might get even less happy and be worried and suspicious if the price is not high. They would think that you may be skimped on doing something or similar. I know it does not sound perfectly reasonable, and that's because people are not always perfectly reasonable. But people who are able to see what kind of person they are dealing with and make them happy, that goes a long way. For example, I'm not happy with doing a poor job. And when I see that someone wants something to be done cheaply, even if it's done in a haste and poorly, I know that how to make that person happy, but I would not feel happy with my work, and I will just say, okay, I can please look further, because it's important to keep that person happy and not disappoint them. And so that's one thing to have in mind. And not all the shops are perfectly flexible, just like I'm not perfectly flexible or anyone else. and not every shop is a good fit for every person. But I hope this advice will help you find a good shop, find a good service. And I love to hear feedback from both people who have their bicycle serviced and from people who service bicycles. Any additions, corrections, if I forgot to mention something, I might be catching a cold or some angle. So, and that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in some other video. Cheers.